Morning, we are going to read from some verses in Esther 5. Is that right, Toby?
Sure, if that's what you want, John.
I think it is. I think it's...
We're going to do, Esther 5, verses 12 through 14, and that's page 413 if you're using the chair Bible. Starting in verse 12, Then Haman said, Even Queen Esther let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all of this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
So the moral is don't upset Zeresh.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, thanks for reading that. We'll unpack that in a minute. But just to kick it off here, we are Grace Life Bible Church. Our values are knowing God and His Word, experiencing grace, extending grace, growing in healthy relationships, and then impacting those near and far, right? We impact whoever we are next to. We're resilient disciples who are invited to trust God with our plans, step out in dependent faith and courage when He presents an opportunity. So part of plans are waiting patiently for the right time. We're not in control of much, right? We need to make plans. We'll get into this, but we also have to wait, and we see that in the text here today. And so we have been going through the book of Esther, and where is God is a question we are talking about. God can be found in places where you least expect to find Him, and also God can find you in places you least expect to be found. In Persia, they don't expect to be found, and yet they can be found, okay? So that's kind of what we're doing. And this is a little card. We had these cards in the back, and I have one in my billfold, and I just wanted to kind of explain, CJ did it last time, but there's cards back there in the info booth. Just grab one, take it with you, stick it on the mirror in your kitchen, or maybe get a tattoo, or whatever, you know. But anyway, it says, I'm safe because I am not alone. I am loved. God knows my future and has His fingerprints on my story long before I encounter a crisis. We all have and will encounter a crisis, right? And so where do you see God's fingerprints? I'm just inviting you on the back to write it. And just this last week, my son and his wife were looking at a car in the rain at Casey's, trying to, get a good deal, a good car. And he's like, well, I'm probably going to, get the Carfax thing. And so we're looking at this car, and just then pulls up a guy in a Corwin Toyota shirt, hat, truck, and he's like, hey, Dr. Holmes. He's a former student. He comes over, what are you doing? I said, my son's looking at his car. Well, he whips out his phone. Do you want the dealer Carfax thing? Boop, boop, boop. Here it is. Just like that. And is that God's fingerprint? It doesn't mean the car will never blow up. It's nice. It's just like, okay, God provided a little thing in this event, okay? And so big and little, I encourage you to just think in terms of where are you seeing God's fingerprints in your life in big and little ways, okay? So that, and now we go review. Chapter 1, am I alone? No. God can find you where you least expect to be found. Chapter 2, am I beautiful, or men, am I adequate? That's kind of that's how our motor runs. I don't care if I'm beautiful. I want to be adequate. All right, we're wired differently. And yes, okay, I am beautiful or adequate, not because I perform for the king, but because the king has already performed for me. I am loved as I am. Am I safe? What is safety anyway? I'm safe. I'm not alone, and His fingerprints are on my story, okay? Am I the hero last week? Am I the hero of my story? Well, it's His fingerprints on my story, not mine. So He's the hero. I don't have to try to be the hero. And today, am I trusting God with my plans? That's kind of where we are. And so we're studying the book of Esther, and it happens in a place called Persia. And if you're new to the Bible, you might be thinking, wait a minute, I thought the Bible happened in Israel with Jews. It's like, well, yes, but this story happens a long ways away in Persia with a few Jews and a lot of Persians. So what's up with that? How did we get there? Going to crash course some history here. And so the history of Israel. You have a couple kings. You have King Saul, King David. You've probably heard of him, King Solomon. When Solomon dies, the nation splits like a civil war, and you have Israel in the top half, the northern part, and a couple tribes called Judah in the bottom part. About 722 BC, Assyria wipes out, annihilates, nukes, just gone. Israel is gone, okay? And so that happens, but then you still have some people in Judah down here, and so this is what Assyria did. Now look at these arrows, they're double-ended. Assyria was pretty brutal in what they did. They would take people from Israel, and they would haul them and scatter them throughout their empire. They would take other foreigners from their empire and go back and dump them in Israel. So they mixed all these people up, and you couldn't talk to your neighbors. You certainly don't worship the same God, and it just diluted faith in the community. But it also meant when the people in Israel married their next-door neighbor, foreigners, they had kids, and those kids were called Samaritans. This is the origin of the Samaritans. This is why the pure, uptight Jew was all wrapped up about Samaritans, because you're not pure. So that's that. And then Assyria falls to Babylon. Now remember, this is basically the same area on a map. It's just one nation becomes more powerful. Babylon becomes powerful. Nebuchadnezzar. There's 3 or 4 times where Nebuchadnezzar sweeps in and takes the smart, talented people away back to Babylon. He says in 2 Kings, Nebuchadnezzar carried away all Jerusalem, all the officials, all the men of valor, 10,000 captives, all the craftsmen, all the smiths. None remained except the poorest of the land. Now that specific one is right here, the year's 597. Ezekiel is also taken captive, and after he's captive, Ezekiel writes his book in captivity. Anyway, so this is Babylon, and the temple is destroyed in 586. And interesting, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but listen to this verse from Jeremiah, speaking to the captives in Babylon. God tells Jeremiah, tell the people in exile, build houses, live in them, plant gardens, eat the produce, take wives, have sons and daughters, take wives for your sons, give your daughters in marriage. That's obviously to Jews. I mean, then he's not instructing them to marry pagans, but that they might bear sons and daughters. Multiply, don't decrease. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find welfare. Isn't that weird? I mean, he's like, hey, you're here, but flourish and prosper. And they did. They had kids. So if there's 10,000 just in this little batch, they're going to turn into 30,000 if these 3 kids, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows. Okay. So, but there's also verses that I don't have time to get into, but basically God says, when you can, flee Babylon, get out of Babylon. That was the instruction. So they're not just supposed to stay there forever. Okay. All right. So Babylon takes people from Judah, the smart, the talented, and they're employed, and they're thriving in their commerce and their technicality and industry, and that's what's going on there. And then Babylon falls to Persia, and Cyrus is the king that lets them go, and Cyrus rebuilds the temple 70 years later, and Cyrus lets the people go, and so Zerubbabel takes 50,000 people back. They've multiplied, and there were 3 or 4 waves of taking people out. And so there's 60 years since the first group left Persia to go back to Israel. 60 years later, the story of Esther happens, and there's other returns after the story of Esther. Kind of curious, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm like, is Esther's story, is that at all a motivation for other people to like, hey, I want to go back? I don't know, maybe not. Okay, this is what the map does in Persia. Cyrus says, you people, you Jews can go back. So they go back to Judah. And this is the route Ezra took. But anyway, maybe his GPS was, rerouting. But they go back to Judah. So that's pretty much basically what we're doing here. And this is where the story of Esther happens. All right? So Esther is our mysterious queen. She is really... you read the story, and this is a book that you have to read, and you have to stop and think, what is going on? Why is this? And pay attention to details. But she was the the perfect, no name, no nationality, I can fit in, I can be Mother Persia, I can be supporting Persia. She never told anybody her identity, her Jewish heritage, or her family. So she represents the great Persian kingdom, just a woman that has no ties. In fact, I read this week, a Persian queen was supposed to be taken from among the 7 noble families that assisted the Magi when Darius came to power. His father, Xerxes' father, Ahasuerus. So Xerxes and Ahasuerus, same guy, Greek name versus a Hebrew name, so I might use those interchangeably. But Ahasuerus, the king in Persia, Esther's husband, king, he was supposed to choose from a certain group of women, and Esther wasn't one of them. So I'm setting it up. Last week, Toby talked about, hey, you got to tell your identity. And there's like 49 reasons why that's a bad idea, okay? All right, moving on. So the heart-stopping request, Mordecai says, you have to reveal your identity and tell him and plead for our lives because this Haman character is trying to kill us all. You got to stand up and do something. Wow. So what's the king supposed to do when she says, oh, by the way, I'm one of those people, and Haman's trying to kill us? And the king would be like, wait a minute. Haman told me about you guys. You're that nation without a nation that still has nationality. I mean, you don't follow my laws. You do your own laws, and you're scattered all over the place. You're part of them. Haman says, so it's really not a good position for her to be in. Like, hey, this is who I am. I'm connected. I'm not unconnected. And so the king has no reason to hear this and respond favorably. All right? And yet that's the plan. This is the plan. I'm going to go to the king and tell him what's going on. But she is on super thin ice. And how does she stop Haman? Right? Haman is the king's number 1 man. You don't get to that position without a track record and trust. Okay? Wow. Okay, so this is where we're going. Am I trusting God with my plans? And what does it mean when my plans fail? Does it mean they were wrong? Do all our plans have to succeed? I mean, if God is good, won't all our plans succeed? You see how stupid that sounds? I mean, it's inviting, but it's not the way it works, okay? All right, so by the chapter 5 here, the first half, Esther has a plan for a feast. The second half of the chapter, Haman has a plan to kill. Which plan works? Are we going to feast or have a killing? All right. So we go to chapter 5, verse 1. All right. Chapter 5, verse 1. This verse is interesting. There's in the Hebrew, there's 5 words for the Hebrew word king. 5 times in one little verse. And this just sets up the king. She's facing the king. And you get this tension that like, okay, this is a big deal. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robe, stood in the inner courtyard of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, where the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room, those are all king words, opposite the entrance to the palace. Who wrote this book? Was he like a civil engineer? Like what in the world, right? But you get the sense that this is the inner court. This is where Esther is hanging out here. And you have this kind of these rings of proximity to power, and she's going closer and closer to the king. What's the king going to do? And just in case that diagram isn't helpful, here's another picture. And so this is, again, where Esther would be really close to the throne hall, where he's sitting on the throne, and Mordecai works at the gate. Okay, anyway. So, and it says she put on her royal robes, which is to be clothed in authority, so it's suiting for her. You know, Vashti would put on the royal crown, and that's her role, but this is where what's going on here. But it's interesting because, you know, last week we heard that you don't just waltz into the king's presence, you have to be invited, and she wasn't invited, so she is risking her life just barging in. Well, actually, she stood out there, and the king saw her, and he knows what's going on. He's like, I didn't call you here. I haven't seen you for 30 days. He could be like, gone. And she's gone. But he extends the scepter, all right? And so the king is probably like, nobody does this. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what's going on? I mean, to approach me uninvited, that's unheard of. obviously, because you can get killed. So the king is like, you are mysterious, all right? And so verse 2, the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, and she won favor in his sight. That's God's thumbprint, right? And he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand, and Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, which was a sign of accepting it. The king said, what is it, Queen Esther? What's your request? It shall be given to you even to half my kingdom. Okay? So first off, the scepter thing. This is Darius, so this is Ahasuerus, Xerxes' father, and he's holding a scepter, and that's just what they had in that culture. And to extend it means, welcome. I'm not going to kill you. And this is, again, Darius, and this is Xerxes right here. This is the image of Ahasuerus, Esther's husband, behind his father, Darius. And he's got the thing there. Okay, so that's that. But it's kind of a neat picture of the gospel, isn't it? I mean, we don't have the privilege of waltzing into the king's presence when we're covered with sin. And God in his grace is extending the scepter, which is Jesus. We accept him and we have an audience with the king. It's just a loose metaphor there, but I think it works, all right? And she won favor. Again, God's favor is all over her in a lot of different places. When he says up to half the kingdom, it doesn't mean that. That's a cultural phrase that they would use, like ask me whatever you want. I'm ready to give you a very large gift, but she can't ask for 62.5 of the provinces. He'd be like, yeah, that's not how this works, Esther. Okay. So anyway. And so what does she do? Again, her goal here is to stop Haman from killing the Jews, but she can't just waltz into the king's presence and point to the king's number one trusted man and say, he is a very bad man, he's evil, and you need to kill him. It's like, no, right? So how does she get the king to look at Haman with suspicious eyes? All right, that's kind of what's going on here. So from Esther's perspective, she knows that Haman is trying to take her away from the king by killing her and all the Jews, right? From Haman's perspective, he's trying to take all the Jews away from the king, but he doesn't know Esther is one of the Jews. And so you've got this plot thickening, and the king's like, what's going on? How come this woman waltzes in here? And so the king has tension, and at the center is this mysterious woman. Okay, so this book, I used to teach it in 20 minutes, an Old Testament survey, and so I've never got in this deep before, and I'm reading and studying, and I'm like, what is going on? There's a whole bunch of, Toby and I talk, there's some strange stuff here, and you really have to you have to slow down and think and really get into it, because sometimes the key is in very small things, okay? And so here's an example of small things. Rachel Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. Small things matter, right? I mean, you need to buy a comma or two. Okay, and so that's just kind of silly, but anyway, it's just a classic example of how meaning changes. And so look at verse 4. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I've prepared for the king. Now that's the ESV version, except that's not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I've prepared for him. Not second person, third person, for him. All right? Well, she's talking to the king, so she would say for you if she meant the king. She doesn't say that. She says for him. That's weird. Hey, come to this party that I've prepared for him. Who? Who's him? Again, the king is surrounded in mystery and tension, okay? Either Esther is like, I'm preparing a banquet for Haman, which is like bad news for the king. Like, what? Why him? What's going on? You and him, why are you bringing him here? Or she's saying, yeah, I'm in, it's for you, but I'm also invited. Either way, it's bad news, right? Because he's like, what is going on, all right? But grammatically, I have prepared this banquet for him. Talking to the king, it's for him. It's for Haman, okay? Mysterious woman, all right? And so the king is all wrapped up like, what does that mean? Again, you see what Esther's trying to do? She's trying to create some doubt and suspicion in the king's heart about Haman. If she goes too far, if the king thinks that they're having an affair, they're both dead in 5 minutes. So she has to be very careful about just suggesting, well, here's a party, here's a guy that I'm going to pull into our realm because I want you to see the evil in his heart without telling you that. It's complicated, okay? So the king is like, well, what's going on here? Is she at fault? Is he at fault? And a lot of questions. She's super delicate, but she has to arouse suspicion, okay? Again, why not just say, hey, he's a bad guy, kill him? Well, timing is one thing. She has to be careful about that. The other thing is privacy. Right now, the royal palace, there's no privacy. You have people everywhere. So she's like, let's come to a banquet, a private, small affair, and then you can, I'll talk to you. Okay, so the king says, verse 5, bring Haman quickly so we can do as Esther has asked. Isn't this great? Now Mordecai is following Esther's order. Now the king is following Esther's orders. Hey, we got to do what she said. Go get Haman quickly. Why quickly? He's like, I got to figure this out. What's going on? She walks in here and she's talking about weird banquets for who knows who and figure it out. Go get him. So Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. All right, so here's a banquet. Here's a picture. This is actually an Assyrian relief, but it just shows drinking and eating and music. See these big feathers here? In the ancient Near East, those feathers are not to cool a person down. They're to keep the bugs off. That's what they were for, okay? Kind of like a horse's tail. Anyway, and I know you're blessed because of that. But anyway, this is just a banquet, and wine is a big part of it. So verse 6, as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, what do you want? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Even to half my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Again, I'm ready to give you a big, lavish gift, whatever you want. And so drinking wine is a big deal to the Persians. These are actual artifacts discovered in Persia. So verse 1, it says drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds. And so they were really into wine and desserts and meat. And their parties weren't raucous affairs like in Rome. They were very organized, very respectful, but they just loved big, lavish parties, okay? We are having a picnic today at 5 o'clock. We're not going to have those. Just little paper cups, all right? Just in case you're wondering, all right? Verse 7, Esther answered, my wish and my request is, if I found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to a feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king said. Well, another banquet? What is with you, woman? Just give me the answer. But now look at the pronoun here. Come, that the king and Haman come to the feast that I've prepared for them. Now it's plural. Now it's both of you. So whatever it was, it's changed. It was for one person, and the other person can tag along. It was for Haman, and the king, you can come along, but it's for him. Now it's for both of you. So the king is that's not lost on the king. He's just like, again, what is the relationship with you and Haman? What's going on here, okay? She's pulling the king in and elevating the king to the position of Haman. And I don't know if Haman had a track record of wanting more power than he should have wanted. There's evidence that all over the text about wanting to be worshipped and wanting power. And so maybe she's trying to leverage a pre-existing suspicion of the king about Haman's hunger for power. I don't know. But anyway, what this does is it pleases Haman's ego. He's like, I am a big deal. And it creates suspicion in the heart of the king. So her plan is to transfer her vulnerability to Haman and to transfer the anger of the king that could be directed to her towards Haman as well. And so it's a bit like martial arts. One of the things with martial arts is that when someone extends and throws a punch, you use their momentum against them, and so you take it, you deflect it, and redirect it. And that's exactly what she's doing. She wants to cultivate a little bit of anger and hostility in the king, but then she needs to, when that's released, she needs to be able to deflect it and have a target ready to receive it, and that's Haman. So this is a pretty sophisticated dance here that she's doing, all right? So the king is wondering what's going on, and she's creating tension and doubt, all right? Verse 9, Haman went out that day joyful, glad of heart, but when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him. He was filled with wrath against Mordecai. The poor guy, this is sad. He's got everything in the world, and one man, he just comes unglued. We are seeing Haman being systematically unraveled by his own pride and jealousy. And so he's upset about that. Verse 10, nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. He sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. Haman recounted to them all the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, promotions with the king had honored him, and how he advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Well, this is weird. I mean, imagine you come over to my house for lunch, and I just start launching on how great I am and all the good things I have. And especially if it's family, like I have this many children. Yeah, we know that. This is all public knowledge. It's not like a secret how many kids you have and your position. Like, we know, Dad. But this is him. He's all wrapped up in himself, and he's boasting about four things: the glory of his riches, his status, the honor from the king, and the promotions that he had. All public information. But when he's pressed and stressed out, this is where he goes for his identity. There's a lot of lessons here we could cull if we had the time. Where do we go when we're stressed out in terms of our identity, how we talk about ourselves, things like that. But he's boasting about himself and all that he has in classic verse from Jeremiah 9. Let not the wise man boast in his wisdom, let not the mighty man boast in his might, nor the rich man boast in his riches, but let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth. That is good. I mean, if we're supposed to be boasting, we're supposed to be boasting about, I understand how God is merciful and faithful. Isn't that amazing? That's what I know, okay? Good. All right, verse 12. Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast we prepared. And tomorrow I'm invited by her, not just some courier, by her, together with the king. Verse 13, yet all this is worth nothing to me as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Again, the Jew, Mordecai the Jew. So Haman has given away his happiness to somebody else. He needs some counseling sessions, all right? Again, he's unaware that Esther is a Jew. In verse 14, his wife, who must be related to Jezebel, I'm thinking, his wife Zeresh and his friends say, well, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made. In the morning, tell the king to have Mordecai hanged on it, and then go joyfully with the king to the party. This king pleased Haman. That's a great idea. I'll kill him and then go to the party. Okay, a couple things here. One, can't be too detailed here because of our environment, but gallows, no one's hung in the ancient Near East by a rope on like cowboy days. They're impaled on a pole. That's just what it means to be hung. The Hebrew word means spike or tree. That's just the way it is, okay? And so he builds a gallows in his backyard. This is not Haman's thing, but this is Daniel's tomb in Susa. And it says, how tall is it? 50 cubits high, that's about 75 feet. For your perspective, a farm silo, basically 60 feet. So a little taller than a farm silo. And you're kind of like, well, that's tall. What's up with that? It might be because of the terrain of the land. The palace is on high ground and the city's a little lower, that Haman wants to build it so tall that from the palace at the banquet, he can look and see Haman's body. That's how dark this guy is. You know what I mean? So just kind of a weird deal. But look at the verse here. What does Zeresh, the wife, say? In the morning, tell the king. Not ask the king. Honey, you're telling the king. You know what I mean? You tell the king in the morning, except what happens? We can't, chapter 6 is next week, but chapter 6 starts off with sleepless in Susa. You got Haman, he can't sleep, and the king, he can't sleep. And so Haman goes at midnight, starts throwing rocks at the king's window, like, hey, I got to kill this guy tonight. Like, what is that? It's just, that's next week. But anyway, okay. So Zeresh says, well, just do this in the morning, but he can't wait until the morning. He certainly can't wait 11 months. Remember how they roll the lot, and they're going to kill him in 11 months, giving the Jews time to prepare. That's God's thumbprint everywhere. He can't wait 11 months, can't wait until the next day. He's impatient. Esther's been very patient, and her faith has been enacted. But Haman can't sleep. He is losing the desire to pretend he's not petty. He is a petty soul, and he used to try to cloak it. No longer. All right? And so this chapter ends. We have a plan for a feast. We have a plan for a gallows. Who will eat and who will die? That's next week. But the thing about planning, we as responsible stewards are called to engage our world and to plan. But we're also called to hold those plans in open hands. We don't control by our planning. We're trying to assess, given who I am with my gifting and my resources and my position and the time and place I live, what would you have me do? Lord, this seems to be wise. I've talked to some people, and I'm trying to be wise here. And so this is the plan. Is it your plan? And let's move ahead. Open hands. If sometimes the Lord turns right or turns left, and we're like, okay. And so that's what's going on there. So tragic thing happened back in 2015. There was a ministry couple in Omaha, founded the Hope Center, a pastor, and they were going to go to South Dakota, to the Black Hills, for just a little getaway, a little weekend getaway. Ty and Terry Schenzel, and they were killed. Some guy was driving in the wrong direction on the interstate, going 70 in a pickup truck, and head on, and they died. And how do we rectify plans with tragedy? Again, we're kind of sometimes thinking, well, if God's in the plan, it will work. And if it doesn't work, that means God wasn't in the plan. And that's not necessarily true. We live in a broken world, and we're not immune from disaster just because we believe in Jesus. In fact, if you read the text carefully, there's purpose behind pain and suffering, but there's still pain and suffering, right? And so don't fall into a shallow kind of thing like that. As Toby said last week, the gospel has already dealt with the brokenness of this world. Just because pain and suffering happens doesn't mean God's not in control. We have to check our assumptions of comfort, convenience. In our world, it's really hard not to get sucked into that, right? Something went wrong. What happened? I thought God was good. All right? And God's up in heaven with Gabriel like, what's going on there? I am good. Yeah, I know, but they're wealthy and comfortable. And okay. Anyway, so we live in a broken, fallen world, all right? And so am I trusting God with my plan? The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Many plans are in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand. And there's so many verses that talk about the truth that God is absolutely sovereign. He makes his will is what happens. But there's also, we are free in our choices. We have to plan, we have to choose, and they're both going together like railroad tracks, and somehow they're connected, and I can't explain that. Again, 2 Chronicles, the very end. This is Cyrus. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. Well, God did that. So that Cyrus made a proclamation. He did that. The Jews can go. Both are in play. Acts 2. This Jesus, according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, God said, this is going to happen. Jesus is going to die. You crucified. You did it. He willed it. But you're culpable for your actions. That's the weird thing about this whole tension. You see that if it's all just automatic, yeah, then why are people culpable and held responsible for their choices? Okay, so they're both, okay. There's more and more verses, but we're going to move on. All right. And so, here's the deal. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. We really need to understand, we need to research our plans, spread them out, get buy-in, hear about other people's opinions about them, do some research, wait for God's timing. Esther, the first banquet, this is not the time to point at Haman and yell about how bad he is. Come to another party. Okay? And so, and then make a decision and act. So here's a simple little tactical take home. How do you make wise plans? Where your mission that's uniquely yours, where your ability, which is uniquely yours, and your priorities, which are uniquely yours today, priorities change day to day, where those overlap, that is your sweet spot. Plans where those overlap are likely going to be good plans. We hold them in open hands. That makes sense? Your mission, it's your map, your personal map, your mission, your ability, your priorities. Okay? So that's kind of where we're going with that. It would be an okay tattoo. Just saying. If you can't tell, I'm fascinated with tattoos. I spend a lot of time wondering what my tattoo will be. I never get one. Actually, I do have one right here. Third grade, girl stabbed me with a pencil still in there. Anyway, I was messing with her hair. Anyway, so Esther 5. I trust in God with my plans. I am secure when my plans fail because God's plans never fail. I just have to get on board with what He's doing, right? Instead of getting all wrapped up in my world and, hey, God, how come you're not blessing my plans? And God's like, because they're your plans, all right? I mean, you need to get on board with what I'm doing. I'm not alone. I'm loved, and God knows my future and has His fingerprints on my story long before my plans fail. And remember, when our plans fail, that might be God's success. You're like, excellent. This is what I wanted. Because now you're in a platform to draw closer to me and become more like my son Jesus. That is hard for us to hear, isn't it? And so, okay, our key questions. Are you secure when your plans fail? Do you feel secure? You can grow in that security by simply spending time with God in His Word. What are your plans? Are they different from God's plans? How can you tell? Sometimes it's hard to tell, but we have to do some research and prayer and hold them open and get some feedback and be open to the idea that maybe God has a different idea for His plan. And what meaning do you attach to failed plans? It doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person or God hates you. It doesn't mean that, okay? But it does mean that God has another agenda. He has a purpose beyond our comfort and convenience. And so sometimes things will go bad for the good. Romans 8:28, okay? So we have to get on board with what he's talking about. So and here's the same questions with little answers. You know what I mean? When I'm secure, when my plans fail, because God's plans never fail, and okay. So, yes, Lord, we are grateful that you've built the world and you've equipped us and gifted us, and you expect us to engage and work, leverage the time, talents, and resources that we have for the betterment of people and for your kingdom, so that they would come to a knowledge of who you are and discover how good you are. And our world is full of lies. And we just pray that you would give us the words and the timing to interact with people that are hungry. They maybe don't even know they're hungry for knowledge of you, but just that we could be beacons of that light and point to you. And may our good works glorify you. Amen.